Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
This is Arielle Hyatt from Cyber PR on the Promoter 101 podcast.
It's the world-famous Promoter 101 podcast. This is episode 30, and I'm your cruise director, Dan Steinberg. Joining us, as always, is the lovely and elegant Luke Pierce.
Lovely and elegant. All right, that's definitely an overstatement. I appreciate the warm intro, Dan. Maybe let's focus on this week's show. Coming up, we've got Evenko's Nick Farkas, ITB's Steve Zapp, 888 Management's Whitney Bond, and Creative Law Network's Dave Ratner.
Feel free to email us at Steiny at promoter101.com for any of your thoughts or ideas. We're always ready to listen to you.
Hi, it's Paula Palazzo from Live Nation Concerts Canada, and I'm on Promoter 101.
This coming Wednesday, May 3rd at 4 p.m., Promoter 101, the podcast live interview is going to be featuring Tacoma Dome's Kim Badir with Emporium Presents Dan Steiny Steinberg at the International Association of Venue Managers, that's IAVM's Region 4 Conference, in the theater at the Maidenbauer Center in Bellevue, Washington. Come check it out.
Kim is one of the industry leaders in the venue management world, and that should be a great chat. I'm really looking forward to talking to Kim.
Very excited today that we can reveal that a couple new cities are going to be added to our fall tour. That's going to include Seattle in September. In October, we're going to hit both Boston and Nashville. More details are going to come on those dates shortly.
That should be real exciting. If you want to see us, please tell your university bookers and your conference organizers to bring Promoter 1 podcast to your town for a live taping.
Hey everybody, I'm Chuck Randall. I'm a tour manager, tour director, and a tour accountant for, well, all of your favorite bands. And here I am on Promoter 101.
It's time for News of the Week. We got some breaking news just as we're recording this week's podcast on Friday afternoon. We're citing an article from our good friend Dave Brooks at Billboard about Fire Festival, which is the Ultralux Festival in the Bahamas, being canceled today. It's literally a disaster relief in the Caribbean. Shit began to hit the fan on Thursday night when Blink-182, who was set to headline, announced that they were going to cancel. And then this morning, as it went on, social media became littered with photos of attendees arriving to what they were promised to be luxury villas and glamping, only to find themselves on literally school buses and, as one person put it, disaster relief tents. Flights were being arranged by the festival organizers to get people home. Early Fire Festival investor Ja Rule had no comment on the brewing disaster in the Caribbean. Dan, my question to you is this. One, how does this shit happen? And two, how do the purchasers possibly feel ripped off after they arrive to a site where you're supposed to purchase tickets to see Ja Rule? They realize this is the same Ja Rule from the early 2000s, right?
First of all, these guys don't know how to spell fire. They spell it with a fucking Y. Let's start there. If you can't spell fire, don't give these people money. Second of all, it's an island outside the United States, so trying to collect from these people is going to be a nightmare. On top of everything else, the second you saw Blink file out, you knew it was going to be bad. Like, this is a punk rock band that can play in a warehouse and make it work and still sound good. They've done Warped Tour. They've done warehouse shows. This band has done it all and developed into an arena act. They can make anything work, and this was too sketchy for them. That's got to be a huge indicator that nothing was right. On top of that, yeah, Ja Rule, where the fuck did he come back from? I thought he was dead like 10 years ago with fucking Coolio. What the fuck?
He was actually in jail. He wasn't dead. Big distinction there. But I don't know where he scraped up the coin to invest in this, which has clearly become a disaster. But it wasn't just that. They had involved a bunch of social influencers on Instagram to help support the festival and market it. You had Gigi Hadid out there. You had all these people out there marketing this as like this super ultra luxe event. And it's really just clear to me that the festival organizers were never prepared to make the necessary investments in that island to bring this up to speed. These are people paying $3,000 for ultra luxe experiences, only to basically find themselves on those yellow school buses being brought to disaster relief sites.
Look, at the end of the day, it comes down to this. Doing a festival is a whole lot fucking harder than people think it is. You have to build a concert venue in a fucking field, and you have to have luxury setup there ready to go. You're talking about an island, so you would have had to either fly or ship all of those production elements in to have made that bottle service setup happen. So it's not as easy as it looks to make a Coachella or a Bonnaroo VIP experience happen. The guys from Bottle Rock do it well. There are a lot of people that do it at a very high level, but these people are really, really good at what they do. And if you don't know how to do this business, trying to sell VIP experiences to the elite is just not realistic. It is a service industry, and you better be ready to deliver at the top fucking level, or you will not be back. First annual, last annual. Fuck you.
Some good news. IFPI published its 2016 Global Music Review this past week. The 44-page report was chock full of promising news about the recorded music business. For the second year in a row, recorded music has grown. In 2016, it grew 5.9%, up to $15.7 billion. That comes after 14 years of the decline in the business. For the first time ever, digital revenues account for 50% of our total recorded music, and that's thanks to a 60% plus growth rate in streaming revenues last year. The report was also pretty hard-hitting on value gaps at radio and on YouTube. It touched on emerging markets in streaming in China. Some interesting stats. Some of the most popular artists of 2016, 2 of the top 10, in fact, passed away in 2016. David Bowie and Prince both clocked in the top 10 most popular / best-selling artists, with Bowie's Black Star selling more than 1.6 million units by year's end. The full report is available through IFPI at ifpi.org, or if you're creative enough to find it, you'll see it in a cache somewhere.
Hey, Luke, can I ask you for a second? Bowie and Prince. Bowie was going to release that album one way or another, although it was kind of a farewell note. Those two artists probably would not have done the numbers they did if they hadn't passed, right?
I have to imagine that, especially considering Prince's catalog was not even on streaming services until Koppelman and the guys at the estate, cut that gigantic deal with Spotify. So the fact that he did the numbers that he did, even with his catalog only partially being on Spotify for part of that year, is absolutely incredible. And we had a lot of famous people pass in 2016. It seemed to be the year that everybody kind of went down, from Merle to Gene Wilder to all these people. But those two particular artists, I think, really hit a nerve with a lot of people. They were obviously very important to so many people out there, and people clearly took some time to revisit that music. Now, Prince didn't have a new album out there driving this popularity in it. Bowie obviously did, but still it just speaks volumes to how important their music was to so many people and how monumental their passings were.
Fair enough. The financial terms were not disclosed. However, AEG's wholly owned Madison House Presents will produce 15 to 20 shows a year for the foreseeable future. The deal is to run through at least 2030. Big congrats to Mike Luba and Don Sullivan.
On the heels of that IFPI report, Universal Music Group owner Vivendi announced last week that some investment banks had valued UMG at more than 20 billion euros, which is a massive 30 times EBITDA / earnings, and it's more than 3 times the value that was previously valued at in 2013. Several trade publications are now speculating that this announcement is that Vivendi is going to spin off a minority share of UMG for some cash. Who's that going to be? Well, we could speculate, but we won't. We're just going to see how this one plays out. I'm sure we'll have a chance to comment on this later.
Paul McCartney will play all 4 major New York area arenas on the next leg of his tour, making him the easiest of any of your favorite living Beatles to see live, and conveniently located near you if you live in the New York greater area.
Some sad news. Oscar-winning film director Jonathan Demme died this past week at the age of 73. Demme is probably best known for Silence of the Lambs and Philadelphia, but throughout his life, his heart was always close to music. He directed the Talking Heads' Stop Making Sense. He collaborated several times with Neil Young, and most recently directed Justin Timberlake's Netflix special, JT and the Tennessee Kids. Dan, I probably saw Stop Making Sense about 300 times as a kid. I burned out that VHS tape. It's a very sad day for a real talent. Rest in peace, Jonathan.
Breaking news. This reporter has learned that prominent concert promoter from Emporium Presents, Jason Zink, will announce soon his candidacy for the highest office in the land. Jason will make a great candidate for president, even if he doesn't know that I've announced this and that it's doing it. He'll be an awesome president. Let's get him in office.
We got some birthdays this week. Today, Monday, May 1st, David Rowan of High Road. Tomorrow, Waz Tim Wilson and Leslie Sparacino. On Wednesday, RCA's Nick Light, Brad Simons, Irene Pisani, Monterey International's Jerry Lima. On Thursday, we wish a happy birthday to Webster Hall's Heath Miller and Nashville's Ruth Gonzalez. This Saturday, the founder of Golden Voice, Gary Tovar, my dear friend from Works Entertainment, David Britz, and Facebook Ashley's Bradbury will all be celebrating birthdays. And this Sunday, May 7th, Mark Ross, Sue McLean Associates Tamson's Preston, Madison House's Phil Eganthal, and of course, our very own Promoter 101, Dan Steinberg's birthday. A lot to celebrate this week.
Thanks for remembering, Luke.
That's a wrap for the news of the week.
Patty Ann Tarleton. I'm overseeing Canada for Ticketmaster today, and I'm on Promoter 101.
You want tweets? You can't handle the tweets. It wouldn't be Promoter 101 without the tweets of the week. Let's see what Dan has said this past week on Twitter. He is at the Jew on Twitter. When someone you have not seen in 20 years resurfaces and asks for an off-the-chart favor, as if reuniting and score them 3 wishes. Hashtag, sorry, Aladdin.
Good to hear from you again, but I'm not a fucking genie in a lamp. Bye-bye now.
When an agent tells you your competitor's offer doesn't have royalties, licensing, tax, and insurance. Hashtag run.
So I'm competing with a hobbyist. Let me know how that goes, and hopefully you don't actually need his insurance.
When someone asks you your hours and you can't stop laughing to say this shit is 24/7, son.
Entertainment is a service industry. We're like a Vegas casino. We never close.
When someone comes to you for advice but clearly has no intention of listening to anyone.
We all need to be open to other opinions. It's never too late to learn from other viewpoints.
When someone gives you their full assurance of something happening and you would not still bet against them coming through.
This one goes out to 2 of my favorite people in the world. No need to name names here.
That does it for Promoter 1 Tweets of the Week. You can follow Dan at The Jew on Twitter.
This is Rob Hallett from RoboMagic on Promoter 101.
This week we're introducing a new segment we're going to call 3 Questions, where listeners come on the show and get to ask Steiny and I any 3 questions they'd like. Industry, personal, whatever they want. Most importantly, we haven't seen these questions in advance.
This week, Atomic Music Group's Troy Lawton is with us today. Welcome, Troy.
First one's for Dan. As more and more independent agencies partner with larger agencies, do you see agencies going the way of record labels?
No, I mean, it's the one thing you can do in this industry with no capital. If you understand how to work the phones and the internet and you have an ear for talent, you can be a talent agency. And that can develop into real things. And we've seen some amazing agents start from their bedroom and find their way into a CAA, William Morris, or Paradigm, or ICM. What about you, Luke?
I think the agency business is fundamentally changing to be more media focused, but there's always going to be room for independent operators in that space.
Okay, second question is for Luke. In the early stages of an act's career, who are your key players?
At an early stage, I can't say enough about songwriters and producers, whether that be the artist who's a songwriter or, a producer in that role, helping to craft the sound and tone of an artist. We always talk about song being king, and we talk about content being king, and the creation of those things are paramount to the development and the success of an act.
What is your most spun song at the moment?
I've been listening to a ton of Wheeler Walker Jr.
Personally, I've been going back to some of my favorite classics from high school lately. I've been listening to They Might Be Giants, The Stone Roses, The Violent Femmes, early Offspring. We were just playing some early Green Day earlier today, some Lagwagon. Thinking early Warp Days kind of stuff. I'm planning on playing some Dash Hell Crashers later on this afternoon.
Right on.
Hey, man, we want to thank you for taking time for popping on and doing 3 questions with us. And also, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. It means the world to us.
Yes, of course.
My name is Larry LeBlanc. I'm the senior editor of Celebrity Access. I live in Toronto, and I'm on Promoter 101.
This week, we're excited for our first interview, being joined by Evenko's Nick Farkas. We sat down to talk about Osheaga and Heavy Montreal and having an absolute lock on their market.
Promoter 101, we are at Canadian Music Week, hanging out in the suite with Evenko's Nick Farkas. Nick, thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
So you guys have a lock on your market. Not like anyone has since Graham in San Francisco or Jam in Chicago. You guys have the arena, you have the festival, you have the clubs. You guys truly, from top to bottom, develop and bring them all the way up.
Yeah, it's always been our philosophy since the beginning. I've started booking clubs, so that's my background. And artist development, there was never big artist development budgets to bring bands to Montreal anyway. So we, as promoters, since the beginning, we've always kind of saw what we do as artist development. So going from, 100 cap clubs to, the festivals, 45, 50,000 people, whatever it is. We run the gamut, like this entire chain of size venues from, we really, really believe that if a band comes and plays once, then, you're going to get the opportunity to see a bump on the next time they come through. And anytime a band skips the market, we've seen it with, bands over the years that have just only done Toronto, Vancouver, and skip Montreal. Then when it comes to playing the market, you're way behind. So I really, really cannot stress how important it is to get into the market as early as possible.
Now, your language barrier up there is, I find, an interesting thing because unlike most of Canada, French part of that area is really thick.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been, I think, perhaps one of the reasons we've been able to lock down the market the way we have is that there is a barrier to doing business in Quebec to a certain extent. Most people in Montreal speak English anyways, but there's a second language and 85% of the population speaks French.
You go to the restaurants, the menus have both English and French. Do you have to run ads in both languages?
Run ads in both languages. Everything has to be translated. Everything has to, everything you do has to be in both languages.
Are you fluent?
Yeah, we went to French school from like the age of 5 on, so I speak good French. I speak well. I speak good French.
Well, for a concert promoter.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the whole menu thing, you get so used to like looking at one side for English, one side for French. Whenever I go to other cities, it's like I literally don't look at one side of the menu half the time because you think it's just going to be a repeat of what's on the other side. So you miss half the food, which kind of sucks.
I can respect the shit out of that. You're in a world where you guys do the festival too. And your festival is considered not only to be amazing, but everybody talks about the catering as well as being the best of any festival out there.
Yeah, it's been our calling card, I think, for the industry. When we started it...
Osheaga is what we're talking about.
Yeah, Osheaga. I mean, for us, like this year, 12, which is crazy. I can't even imagine that it's been 12 years since we've been doing this. But when we started, we really wanted the fan experience and the band experience to be second to none. We knew that the only way we would make it as a festival in a market that isn't, we thought, big enough to sustain a festival without getting a lot of people traveling to it was to really take care of people. And, for the food thing, it's been, anytime I get introduced to anyone now, it's like, oh, this is Nick from Evenko, Osheaga Montreal. I was like, oh, you're the festival with the food. And everyone talks about your food, which is amazing. The guy who does our food, the chefs we have have 2 restaurants in Montreal. And it's been for them, it's a labor of love. Like their team works their asses off and creates this really incredible environment where, they're always trying to outdo each other. It's like, hey, we got a prosciutto slicing station. Hey, we got a raw bar. And, we bring in a pizza oven from New Hampshire so we can cook pizzas outside. They're always pushing the limit. Chuck Hughes and Danny Smiles are just amazing guys to work with. Chuck did the Warped Tour for us 100 years ago and ran into him, and he was like, this was like 7 years ago, I guess, when we started doing it, and he was like, I want to cook for bands again. And I was like, okay, well, we have the perfect opportunity if you want to come cook at Osheaga. And since that point on, it's been a great thing, and it's a great thing to be known for. And it's, our site's fantastic. We're doing, we've got Heavy Montreal, our metal festival, and we've got Sonic, which is our EDM festival, and it's just an amazing site. For people who have never been, it's like in the middle of the St. Lawrence River on an island that you can get to by subway from Montreal, so it's like the best of all possible worlds.
The Heavy Montreal is like Ozfest meets Warped Tour, right?
It's a festival that hasn't been the easiest to find its identity. Like, we've gone the punk rock and metal route, and now we're just going straight back to, hard rock metal. Because the punk rock stuff doesn't mix well in this market. It just doesn't seem to work for us. So we're going back to more of the roots of the earlier years of the festival.
It's an interesting concept. I want to go back to Osheaga for a second. I got to enjoy that festival for the first time this year, and I thought the best tip ever was, as I was getting there, Daniel Glick said, just eat a little and eat many times, because they keep putting out different things, so keep coming back and snack all day long. He's like, you can come in catering as many times as you want, so it's not a ticket thing, don't worry about it, but you got to keep seeing what they're putting out. It was the most interesting thing that it was like, going back became this, I wonder what's there now, because it changed throughout the course of the day.
The first thing we discussed when we started getting into the food thing was, I'm like, I hate the idea of showing up at catering and you're between breakfast and lunch. And they were like, oh, come back in an hour, there's going to be dinner. So I told them, like, the one thing that we absolutely positively have to have is the minute the first tool bus rolls in the morning, I want food constantly, like constant food, like no downtime, nobody getting stuck at the border and then having to wait 3 hours for food. And so it was really that concept where there wouldn't be meal tickets and there wouldn't be, it would just be kind of a free-for-all.
And it's a great hang in there, too, because everybody's hanging out and eating. It was like
no one ever leaves.
Yeah, sitting next to Chad Smith talking for 20 minutes about how cool the foodie kind of vibe was in catering. And it's like, where else is that going to happen where you're going to get to hang out with a drummer from the Chili Peppers for 20 minutes just talking about food?
Been to a lot of festivals, and there's generally more segregation, but with having everybody, all of the dressing rooms and everything are right around the catering, you get like impromptu, like seeing people hanging out is really fun, seeing different bands all sitting together at a table. A bunch of people tell me that's one thing that they really enjoy, is that they're able to just go and sit and hang out and talk to whoever they want. And
what you want to do, because walking that ground is I looked at my phone, it was 13 and a half miles I put on my feet that day, because it's huge. The property is huge.
It's not as big as, it's big, but it doesn't feel huge. There's a lot of different spots and different areas, so you're going from zone to zone. You do a lot of miles in a day for sure. I feel like there's a lot of sites that are bigger.
There's definitely the golf cart, so you can certainly zap around quickly if you need to.
That helps.
But
we didn't have golf carts the first few years.
Oh, really? So that made it a little harder.
Couldn't afford them. And also the site was a lot smaller. But it was a real struggle early on, to get it off the ground.
It sells out automatically, pretty much. It's it seems like money's probably not the issue, but I guess going back building that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, there was really a belief in the vision that, like I said, we never wanted to cut on the artist services. We never wanted to cut on the experience, because I knew if you cut there, people wouldn't come back, and we knew that we had to build a bit of momentum with reputation in order to get people to come. And we do 70% of our people from outside of the province of Quebec, which is unheard of in our part of the world. For that many people to be traveling from all over is pretty cool.
Now, the lineup is amazingly well done. You have big acts, but not just the current headliners. You guys brought in Cypress Hill last year, which the crowd responded to really, really well. But obviously nothing current there at all, but one of the highlights of the show for sure.
It's interesting because I get a lot of credit for booking it, but I don't book it. Since the beginning, we've been booking it by committee with Daniel Glick and Joel and Dom back in the day, and all our bookers all work on it. So everybody sits in the meetings, everybody sweats every band, and it really creates, when you've got an older gentleman like myself and then a bunch of younger people, that everybody has completely different music tastes and everyone's fighting. It used to be I would want to put on a band. Now they're like, well, no one cares about your old man bands. Like, hey, what are you thinking? Why are you putting that on there? So I have to fight for my bands, the bands that I want on, as much as everybody else does. And I think that's allowed us to really curate it in a way that it doesn't just reflect my personal taste or what I think people want to see. It reflects the taste of what 6 or 7 people that are involved in the process want to see, which is much, much harder. And booking by committee is incredibly difficult. And we do it for Heavy as well, a smaller group, but it's really a time consuming, we don't offer by slot. We don't offer by position other than headliners, because, we want to make the lineup work, and we want to look at it. If you confirm a band at 4 o'clock and then the other offer that you have in at 4 o'clock ends up being a similar kind of band, that sucks. There's a lot of crossover. Our goal is to make sure that if we've got an act on at one time on one stage, that the act that's on the other stage is going to be the least conflictual as possible. And you can't do that if you're booking by slots. And I know a lot of people do it that way, but we taught ourselves how to do this, and that's the only way I know how to do it. And we get a lot of pushback. So, well, what slot am I at? I need to confirm my time and my stage and all that in order for me to confirm. I'm like, well, if everybody thought that way, if all 110 acts said, I need to confirm my stage and slot and who I'm up against, then you would never confirm a single artist. So it's kind of a self-defeating prophecy when you go down that road, and we're like, well, we're not going to tell you your slot until we figure it out. And we're going to look out for the band, and we're going to look out for the fans, and we're going to look out for the best interest of the music goer who's actually paying to buy the ticket. So it's really, really, really hard to do. We do it super old school, but you just cut the squares out of the band names and put them on a ridiculous. We don't do that anymore. We do it on a computer now, at least, but it's still we sit in that boardroom and we sweat. Well, we can't put that up against. No, we can't. It's like New Order up against whatever it is, some current Skrillex, and then somebody in the room will be like, "Oh no, we can't do that. I love both those bands." I'm like, well, then we have to argue over whether there is a lot of crossover between New Order and Skrillex or not, and then we ultimately come to a decision that there either is or isn't, and then we move it. And if you have to move it, it's a pain in the ass, but it's just the most organic way we see to do it.
Now, last year you guys fell on the same weekend as Lollapalooza and had a lot of crossover on acts. Is that a normal thing? Do you guys go out of your way to talk to those guys about we can block book if we fall on the same weekend?
Yeah, I talk to Houston a lot. They're amazing. I mean, their festival is incredible, and we're the first Monday in the rest of Canada in August is a holiday. So that weekend, that's the weekend we're always on. The first year we weren't on the same weekend, then we were, then we weren't. And now they're on the same weekend as us. So they're kind of doing it the same way.
It
we
would
do.
benefit both of you to.
For sure. I think it was some struggles at first. They were...
Because Radiohead's just not randomly popping up for a date.
No.
But if you guys are sending 2 offers simultaneously.
That was my reasoning. Is at the beginning when we were trying to do it, we were losing acts to Japan, and we were losing acts to Europe. And I was like, if we could at least have a strong 2, 3, 4 festival grouping in a row, then we're going to be way better off, and people are going to be more likely to stay in North America. So it's worked out incredibly well. I mean, those guys are a pleasure to work with, and we try to keep our festivals distinct, and they've got an extra day, so they've got an extra 60 bands or whatever on us, and also they go in directions that we go in, and it's funny because we'll talk and we'll be like, are you going to do this? And he's like, no, that wouldn't work on my festival. And stuff that works for us doesn't work for them, and stuff that works for them doesn't work for us.
Radiohead and Chili Peppers clearly work for both of you.
Yeah, that worked for everybody, I think, that year. Getting Radiohead was, we'd been trying since year one. So for them to agree to do it was just a culmination of, a lot of hard work, and they're an unbelievably amazing live act and one of the best
their
festival
sound
acts.
worked all the way through your set.
Yeah, we got a great production team that makes sure that these things
I was
work.
really impressed with the site and how well staffed and how smooth everything ran. The logistics of building a festival. Because you're taking a site, basically a big park, and turning it into a concert experience. And whether it's the forest area with hammocks in it, or it's the catering area for the public, or the bathroom facilities, or where the stages are and how they separate, and the bridges having 2 different directions on which direction you can go and how that's staffed. The logistics involved with that is just massive. And I know you learn over time on how to get better at it, but you guys just had that down, and it was incredible to see how beautifully that ran and how peaceful of a day it was.
Thank you. We have a team that just works their asses off, and everybody sweats the details, and they're really proud of the event. So it shows in the attention to detail that everybody pays, from signage to art to everything. And it's trial and error. And in this era of social media telling you what you've fucked up and done well so quickly, with the bridges, we had one year where we put in an extra bridge because it was just getting too congested. And people tell you, they're like, there isn't enough water. There isn't. And we will literally go do a meeting every night after the first night. And we're like, what fucked up? What worked? What didn't work? And then the guys will go and stay out overnight. And it's like, we don't have enough water. We're going to get more water for tomorrow. We've been on the same site for 11 years too, which helps, but we continually expanding and going into new places on the island. So that's a challenge, and it creates, from the beginning, we've always wanted, what I call a wow factor, like people to show up and go, people that had never been there before to go, wow, and to not know exactly where the stages are going to be, to move stuff around and create new environments. And the sponsorship stuff is incredible. Like we never, early on, I was like completely, I wouldn't say I was anti-sponsor, but I was like, sponsors were something that was necessary evil. Now I look at the activations that these companies put together and seeing kids lined up to get into the H&M tent and lined up to get into Osheaga Play Zone.
Cool that you guys are just not even having to think about it, just shows up now.
Yeah, well, we never wanted aggressive, buy this, take this, here, try this thing. It's always been, we wanted people that were going to give a value added to the experience for the fans. So, a lot of the companies now, it's like a completely different world where, back in the day, it was like, I want my name on the stage, and I want this, and I want that. Now they're like, they want to interact. They want to do something that no one else did. Last year we had Cottonelle that had pimped out all the bathrooms. I'm like, that is just brilliant. Prime complaint at a festival is the bathroom experience. So you get a sponsor that's willing to come out and do that. It just adds to the experience. You go to Coachella and it's amazing. There's no logos anywhere, and it's clean, and it's a beautiful canvas. I looked at our stuff and I'm like, we have a ton of sponsors, and it's a different world. Like you have to get your money any way you can when you're in a smaller market and you're paying in Canadian dollars. And so sponsorships, I'd say early on to me was a necessary evil. Now I enjoy seeing these activations and the stuff that these guys come up with. And the kids, it's a different world. When I started, booking punk rock, it's like I went to work for the big promoter in town, Donald K. Donald, and I was like conflicted. I'm like, I've sold out, because there was that vibe, when we were younger, where
there's a real punk rock ethic.
Totally, like selling out is for me like the worst thing you could possibly do. But I think in this new generation, everybody embraces the fact that you have to make a living, and the bands do car commercials, and it's just normal. And interacting with brands is such a normal way of life for millennial generation, or whatever you want to call it. It's an interesting thing, because I never saw the direction reaction going that way at first. I was like, this is good that they're doing stuff. Some of our sponsors were doing stuff that was above and beyond and just the regular stuff. But
I felt like you guys had it very tastefully set up there, too. It was like, you saw it. It was there. There were big areas where they were at, but it didn't hit you over the head.
No, and it's hard, and it's a balancing act, and you talk about the integration of everything, like how to make it flow and how to make the traffic work, and it's like we're moving to a temporary site for the next 2 years while they're redoing our main site. And like we've been over to that island. There's the other island where the racetrack, they have Formula One races, where we're going to be on that island for this year, the next 2 years. And we're sitting with my booking team and the production guys and like, how do we do this? Like, how do we take that and put it over here and make it good and make people want to come back the next year and not just say, okay, we're going to skip a year and then come back in 2019 when the new site's ready. So the challenge is amazing, and I think it's really the funnest part about festivals for us, because we do tons of arena shows, we do tons of club shows, we do 1,300 shows in our market between Vermont and Newfoundland last year, including all the regional stuff that we do in French and stuff. But the creativity that you get in a festival is something that has been the most unifying thing for our company. As our company's grown, IlSonic and all the stuff that we do, we've got a food festival now called You'll Eat. All of these things really allows your team to be creative. You're not just taking an ad mat and plugging it in and booking the same radio spots. You have to come up with the name of your festival. You have to do all the branding. We've had a ton of fun with launching the band names, like on a game one year where you chased through the streets, and every time you got 10 coins or whatever, it would release a band name. And the reveal of the bands became so much fun that it's a way to stand out. And I think in this,
how to one up that every year has got to be a pain in the ass.
It's tough, and we don't try to run up it. We just try to come up with something different. In a sea of festivals where I was just reading an article in Pitchfork about how all our lineups are exactly the same. You got to stand out somehow, and if you're not in a huge market, even more so, you have to figure out ways to get people to notice you.
Yeah, you guys have competition in the comedy space, and it's almost not even a space that you guys really play in much, because Just for Laughs is the world behemoth in that space. I mean,
they're huge.
They produce TV. It's kind of hard to compete with. I can put you in a TV special, or you can play my club. It's a hard fight.
Yeah.
So have you guys kind of foreseen the high ground on that one?
We do stuff with them. We do, they'll come to the arena with stuff. Live Nation does some comedy stuff that we'll do with Live Nation as well. But when we do French comedy, so we have our own French comedians that we work with, they've got a lockdown on the market. It's like, you're not going to take on Just for Laughs. I mean, that's what they do. That's their thing. And they can leverage, like you said, they've got TV shows. They've
festivals.
Yeah, so it's, would I come and try to compete with Osheaga in my market? No. Like, what are you going to do, start up a comedy festival? No. So it's...
well, it's just massive. The fact that the arts are that big. And when I was in town for Just for Laughs, it happened to fall that same lesion of Osheaga, which was genius, because it's always a week apart.
Yeah, I know. It was really cool. We had so many comedians and managers and agents who'd never been to the festival coming over, because it's, it's a 10-minute subway ride from where their site is. So it's really... maybe 15 minutes, but it's really cool. And it's great. I mean, stuff like that puts Montreal on the map. The Montreal Jazz Festival is huge.
The number of venues you guys have downtown within walking distance
of
the conference hotel for Just for Laughs is amazing.
I mean, that's one thing that's not very well known about Montreal, I think, is that the number of small venues, clubs, that we have that are unbelievably good. Corona, Metropolis, National Tulip, Club Soda. Most cities don't have that. And I think my theory is that there in the 70s, there was a big exodus of English people leaving Montreal to go away from the possibility of separation when the Parti Québécois came into power. And you didn't see a crane. There was no investment in the city for decades. So a lot of these places, a lot of cities where these clubs were turned into condominiums and stuff, they just sat empty. No one was developing anything. So then when the building boom started again, and there's buildings going up all over town now, it's like I've got 4 condo towers going up around my office. All of these places that were mothballs, basically, like the Corona's over 100 years old, the Metropolis is over 100 years old. They found a new life, So when I was starting in the 90s,
Corona's the room you took us to see Beirut in, right?
So in the
Very
90s,
cool theater. It's what, 600-700?
It's 900. I mean, I walked in that place for the first time and I was like, holy crap, this is awesome. The sound in that room is, it's one of my favorite places to see a show.
I imagine that place stays pretty busy, right? You guys pop in, 200 shows a year, something like that? Plus?
It's probably close to 200, somewhere in the 150 to 200 range usually per year. But starting out in early 90s, there was no clubs. There was nothing. There was nowhere to book. There was the Spectrum, which was 1,200, which was too big for most of the stuff we were doing. And everything else, there was really, really, really hard to do anything. And now, there was a resurgence of the Montreal club scene, probably later in the 90s, mid-90s through to the current day. And it's been unbelievable. I remember seeing the National too when I went for one of my buddies said, "Hey, there's this great theater on down the street." I'd never even heard of it or seen it, and once again, it's like a 100-year-old theater that still had seats in it, and they took the seats out and turned it into a GA seated flexible room. It was
That's
like
you guys' room, right?
No, that's just an independent. There's a lot of rooms that are independent in Montreal too, which is 300 caps and 200s and 500s, and we're really fortunate that there are so many great venues. And that's the music scene in Montreal, especially, is so like for the size of the city, like the arena does. We're always in like the top 5 or so generally in North America. For the size of the city, people just, well, you've been there, people just go out all the time. They eat, they drink, they party, they go to concerts, and they enjoy the nightlife.
Yeah, it's a different vibe. I mean, even from Toronto to Montreal, it's a very European-esque city. People are smoking everywhere.
People smoke, yeah.
People speak French constantly, which is kind of exciting.
It's completely different.
It raises the vibe. It's not even in a humorous way. Like, it feels very much like you're in Paris.
Yeah, and I think it's a great combination of North America and Europe, and it's... I've been living there my entire life. Had job offers, around the States and stuff and other parts of Canada. And I'm like, every time I start thinking that I'd like to move somewhere that's warmer, Montreal there's something about it. It's an intoxicating city. The scale is so livable, and it's been not expensive compared to most North American cities as well. So the art scene, the music scene, bands can afford to actually live there. The government is great at providing grants and stuff to actually help people's careers. So it's a great market, and I think, I could say this and it sounds biased, but there are like no other crowds I've ever seen. Bands...
You're a strong concert ticket buying market. People come out to shows.
For sure. And, you see from Paul McCartney to Rammstein to whatever it is, like, I don't know how many times I've talked to agents and managers going, they're like, oh, my show last night was kind of I'm like, don't worry. It's Montreal. The fans... they're going to go crazy. Like, I remember having that conversation with 10, 20 agents, managers over the years after bad shows.
Is that right after you tell them it's a walk down?
Yeah. It's really, you've seen it. People aren't afraid to show their emotions when they're watching something. They're into it, and they're going to dance or clap or scream or do whatever, and they don't care. And that's
there's a different vibe in the city too. There's a different way that people carry themselves. It's very European. There's a different vibe, even sexually, that come across where it's not the same wrapped up vibe that we have in the States and down here closer to the border in Canada.
Yeah, it's a very stylish city. People are, very conscientious of the way they dress, but it all looks natural. Like, I don't know how people in Montreal do it, but they just always manage to look good, no matter what they're wearing.
Shitload of beautiful women walking around that town. It's amazing.
It's a great city for many reasons.
We haven't talked about the arena, which you guys also run.
Yeah.
There's not a sports team, or at least a real major league franchise that's associated to the arena, right?
Other than the Montreal Canadiens, no. Yeah. For those of you who are not hockey fans, they would be like the New York Yankees of
hockey's
hockey.
a sport?
Hockey's a big sport in Canada.
They're in
it's our national. Actually, it's not our national sport. I think our national sport is...
It's lacrosse.
Lacrosse, if I'm not mistaken.
I knew that. I didn't know that that's where...
Yeah, the arena was built for her. But it's great. But we don't have a basketball team, which I think helps us in doing more concerts.
And there's no baseball team anymore either, right?
It's too soon. Too soon to talk about that.
Still
bitter. Still.
Hey,
we do Blue Jays games, though. We do.
We've
done 2 preseason Blue Jays games for the last 4 years. Sell like 90 to 100,000 tickets. We definitely want a team back.
How long has it been since the Expos left?
12 years.
Okay, and Seattle has been suffering the Supersonics going to Kansas City for a very long time. So we share this
pain and suffering. Montreal's becoming, it's a great sports town. We have a great CFL football team. That's the Alouettes, and we have a great soccer team now. We're in the MLS.
But the arena thrives on the hockey team then, so the concerts are the wraparound additional days to fill dark nights.
The great thing about the way the Bell Center was built was thought out for music as well as hockey. So it was really like the grid system, the way the whole building, it was built for concerts as well. So they didn't just build a hockey rink and then try to do concerts in a hockey rink. They built an arena that was built for hockey and music. So it's made
you can fly on a massive grid and put real points
exactly. And
up.
The grid moves every 10 feet, so you can hang wherever you want. It's hugely beneficial to us.
You can put a 20 semi show up if you need to.
Yeah, and we can do cut downs, 3,000, 5,000. Every curtained upper bowl. It's really, when they built it, they hired Trizart, which is a company that builds theaters, and helped us when we did U2 outdoors with Live Nation. They helped us to build the stadium that we used to build. So it's like they're a company that really understands
the logistics.
And how do you make a hockey arena more conducive to concerts? Don't build it as a hockey arena. Build it with both things in mind and do it in a way that makes it functional and easy for, crews and stuff. I hear all the time, people are like, wow, we love coming into this room because it's so easy to work.
Is there ownership of the hockey team involved with the Evenko?
Yeah, we're owned by, it's basically Canadians, the Bell Center, and Evenko are all owned by the Molson. It's a Molson family, really. It's Jeff Molson and his two brothers. And they bought the Canadians, I guess, 7 years ago, 7 years ago, from George Gillette, who owned the Canadians and the Bell Center and us prior to that. And he was a businessman from Colorado who owned the team for, I guess, I want to say 10 years, but I'm not sure if it was that long. But so when he sold back to the Molson family, who's, Jeff's, I think it was his grandfather owned the Canadians prior to that. So it was basically company staying in the family. And since the transition from Gillette to Evenko, we have grown exponentially. We've added numerous festivals, and we've taken on a bunch of other new projects. So it's been really fun. It's fun to work with, and when the owner's down the hall, it makes decision making a lot quicker than having to phone someone in another city who has to phone someone in another city, and then it was more difficult. I remember working for House of Blues back in the day, and it was great. Loved working with an amazing team of people there. But it was different. If we had an idea for a festival or had an idea for, I wanted to do something, have to get approval from Toronto, and then Toronto would have to get approval from LA. And by that time, my winter festival...
Eventually get to Alex Hodges.
Yeah, exactly. My winter festival would have been, 2 years overdue. And you have to move quickly because it's, the market, there is competition.
And if you see it, somebody else might too.
Somebody's going to see it. So I love the fact that we're a small, big company that is nimble, and we're able to, jump on opportunities when they present themselves. From sports, we do basketball, preseason games, we do baseball, UFC, boxing, we do a lot of musical stuff now too, musicals and comedy.
Like in the Broadway space?
Yeah, which Montreal was not a good Broadway market, especially for the English side, for a long time. And we've had huge success.
Is that changing?
Yeah, but we have Book of Mormon running through right now. It
seems like that would go over well with the sense of humor of that market.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, it's the second time through doing it, and it's sold out. But working with promoters out here in Toronto for Broadway across Canada, they've been amazing partners to work with. So we're fortunate. We've always believed in working with other people. And my philosophy is always, we partner with tons of different smaller promoters and people on different projects. And it's like, if you can get 100% of nothing, or 10 or 20 or 30% of something, you're better off. That's been my philosophy from the start. And fortunately, the powers that be in our company agree. And it's fun to work with other people. It's fun. You get great ideas.
Well, it certainly seems to be working for you guys. Have to be one of the most successful independent promoters in the world by anyone's standard. And you guys are playing in every different level of the game.
I think you have to survive. And I think that's why, I remember doing heavy for the first time and getting absolutely asses kicked. Like our Iron Maiden day was huge, and then our Motley Crue day didn't sell very well for some reason. And I'm like, what? I want to do this again. This is too much fun, but no one's ever going to let me do this again. Like Osheaga was a hard enough sell in the beginning. That the fact that they let us keep doing it after the first couple of years was a miracle.
Because you didn't make money those first couple years.
Lean years. Yeah, it was.
It's funny when you look back at those things because everybody talks about, oh, it's a given. Coachella was always going to be a winner. Because you hear that now, but the history of that is it put Paul in a position with his partner, Rick, that they had to cut a deal most likely because it went so badly that last year to keep everything above board. So
it's tough. Like the first few years for us were the first year we did it, we pulled it off, and we were an office of maybe, I don't think we were 20 people, and we did it all. Like we were booking the shows, we were always booking clubs, arena, and hey, let's throw in a festival. Like we couldn't staff up the year 2 because we'd gotten killed year 1. And then year 2 things were even worse. So we couldn't staff up anymore in year 2. And then by year 3 things started to get a little bit better. And I remember everyone was like, oh, Coachella struggled in the beginning and everybody struggles and it's like a 4 or 5 year plan. And I thought it would be a 4 or 5 year plan from the start. And then going seeing Adam Zach's at something, and I think it was Polestar or something. I'm like, yeah, how many years did it take you guys to break even and make money? He's like, oh, we sold out the first year. I was like, that's not lifting my spirits at all. But he
started with the Gorge as his template.
Yeah,
so
exactly. He did. He's got it.
Adam had a nice destination space to deal with.
He did. He had a very nice canvas to work with.
But you must have wanted to polarize the shit out of it at that moment.
I was like, come on, really? First year?
It's like misery loves company. Help me out here a little bit, buddy.
Yeah. So I remember thinking, okay, we've managed to get Osheaga off the ground and heavy. How can we get heavy? I was like, fuck, Coachella Stagecoach. Well, we can't do a country festival in Montreal, but we can definitely do a metal festival. So back to back, the production. Now we've added in Sonic the following weekend. We're not doing heavy this year.
Why can't you do a country festival there? Is it just not a market?
I would say we could now, but back in
with
the
the
day,
success of country to country overseas, you would think.
like no one will sell us a country show. Like Montreal was like it was like no country music map included Montreal. It was like a place that you would just fly over or drive by on your way to Atlantic, Canada, the Maritimes, to maybe play Halifax or Moncton. But there's never been country radio in Montreal.
The only time in the world you hear somebody blow through there to go play Halifax.
Exactly. I could not get anyone to sell us a country show. And then,
I'm sure the bigger tours now play the arena, right? Like
they
Eric
do.
Church comes through, stuff like
yeah,
that,
we've
right?
had, I think the big turning point for us was selling 15,000 tickets for Luke Bryan in one day. And I was like, holy, what the? Like, all of a sudden we're a viable country market. And it's because, country music was based on radio play, and we had no country radio. So no one would come. So nobody would play it. It was really like now we've had, we just had the Dixie Chicks last weekend, Florida Georgia Line coming through. And Vermont, Burlington, is a huge country market. An hour and a half away.
That's America. That's better.
But it's an hour and a half away.
Yeah,
so,
but you don't need a passport to get over.
Exactly. But
Which a lot of the country acts don't have. The country to country thing was a big thing because acts then had to start getting passports because there was no need. A lot of them had never gotten them.
Yeah,
it's a true story.
You don't need a passport to go from Tennessee to Mississippi.
No, but you do to go to Canada.
Exactly.
You used to not, which is why more of the acts came over. But now that country to country is a thing and all the acts see themselves wanting to do that as a development thing.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think, obviously it's the World Wide Web has allowed people to discover country music in Montreal. It's been really fun to watch and seeing the crowd reaction. And actually, we've got 2 Keith Urban dates coming up at the end of the summer, one in Montreal, one in Quebec City. At the time, obviously, we were like, there's no way in hell we could do a country festival in Montreal. So the Metal Festival was like, we can do metal. Montreal's like the metal capital of
And it works
the
now,
world.
right? I mean,
yeah, we took a year off this year because we just had Metallica's coming through, Guns N' Roses coming through, Tool's coming through. We're like, we're not going to blow our brains out and try to do something.
you're competing against yourself.
We're competing against ourselves. So we took a year off in 2008 as well. Came back stronger than ever. And metal's like the most cyclical of all music. Like it's up, it comes down for a couple of years. You can't sell, it. You're
and it's up right now anyway because of the tours. But
it's great. Like right
why
now,
compete with that? Right.
Everything's selling again. But for like 2-3 years, I was talking to Manuel Patterson in Toronto, who does a ton of metal shows. I'm like, fuck, are you getting killed on everything? He's like, dude, this is unbelievable. It was carnage for like 2-3 years there. Even the arena stuff was underperforming. But now it's back, and it's of all the musical styles that we book, I think it's the most cyclical because it really peaks, and then people get super into it.
And then they get reminiscent of those early albums because metal albums are like that. They stick in your head.
Exactly.
You want to go back to those early Slayer albums.
Exactly. And then now, those bands are bigger than ever. And Metallica's going to come through and sell 40,000 tickets again in Montreal. It's always been a great market. So to have that, you're building a small city. So if you can amortize that small city over multiple weekends, you're way ahead of the game. And then when we started with Sonic, which, has blown out, like we sold almost 25,000 tickets a day last year for the 3rd-year festival. It's the growth of Sonic versus the growth of any other festival we've ever had has been astronomical. Just to watch it, and it's so much fun and it's so different. So you're having those 3 concert experiences over 3 weekends is really it's a huge challenge for our team, but it's very unique.
Before I let you go, I'm curious about, you've obviously seen the Coachella model, the ACL model of doing 2 weekends. Is that something that Osheaga could ever roll into?
We don't have the population base for it. Honestly, it's like we don't sell out in advance. We sell out in advance, but usually sometimes it'll be the week before, 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before. So we just don't have a strong enough population to ever get there. And they're new building the site that they're redoing. Our current site is going to be bigger. Should be up around 60, 65,000. I think if we ever hit those kinds of numbers, I would be ecstatic. So I'd love to do it. And I remember talking to some of the Golden Voice people. A lot of them have been to Osheaga and stuff. And I was like, wow, 2 weekends. And the best reason for me to do 2 weekends is to actually see the bands the second weekend that you didn't get to see the first weekend. And as Osheaga's gotten bigger and more people come in and more fellows like yourself who come in, there's so many people to see and so much to do and so many people to talk to.
You're working the room.
You're working the room, and you don't get to see the bands that you want to see. And, my 6-year-old son is still, every time the Strumbrellas comes on the radio, he's like, we missed that set, Dada. He's like pissed off that he didn't get to see them because that was the one band.
How proud are you of him that he's pissed off about that?
Yeah,
You're raising a music fan.
He was definitely, he's like, we're going to go see them next time. I'm like, yes, for sure. We're going to go see them next time. As much as I'd love to be able to see all those bands twice in 2 weekends, I just don't see it as being something that will ever happen. But you never know. Fingers crossed.
It's a genius concept, and dividing your resources may not be the greatest concept ever, but it's an amazing weekend.
I think it's amazing what those guys have done. I mean, that's just hats off to them. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, to do that 2 weekends in a row and have that kind of enormous fan drawing ability is just, it's a testament to them getting into the game very early and understanding their market. Every time I go, I hadn't been in a long time. I went last year and I hadn't been for like 6 years or something. And the most, we go to festivals. My team goes to a lot of festivals. And when you go to see how other people do it and try to get, inspiration on ways that we can improve our site. And you look at the way that those guys do that and they're just like, holy, like this is just so well organized and structured. And
they talked about that. Rick and Paul got to travel all over the world seeing everyone else's festivals when they wanted to design Coachella, and they got to do that in the name of research.
Exactly. So me and Glick went to, and Fred Carl, the guy who does all the art and like cohesion of the site. He's like really creative dude. And we went to Life is Beautiful, like totally just as tourists to see another festival, to, get inspired and try to, come back from it and just like kind of see something different and see if there's some ways to improve what we do. And we always based Osheaga on very European. I think the reality was early on, like it was Warped Tour and there was Edge Fest and Somersault and all these festivals that would come through. And the Canadian festivals just never reflect the lineups. Something that works in Edmonton and Calgary and in Toronto and Vancouver doesn't necessarily work in Montreal or out east. So all these lineups would, Toronto would sell 30,000 tickets, then we'd get our asses kicked and sell like 10,000 for like a Nickelback Our Lady Peace package. So we were like, with Osheaga, we're like, we want to create a destination festival that the music actually speaks to the people that live here. So we tried to build it based on what people we knew in our market wanted to see and hoped that would expand beyond our borders.
Well, it certainly seems like you've done that. And on top of that, your passion and energy for the industry is amazing for being an industry vet as long as you have been. It's not something everybody still has. It's impressive to see.
I love it. I mean, we're lifers, right? I never wake up in the morning and don't want to go to work. My dad told me when I was like 14 or 15 and he changed jobs. He was an electrical engineer and he taught and he went, taught all over the world, trained people how to use telecommunication systems. And he's like, if you can find a job that you like, that you want to go to work at, he's like, you're ahead of 95% of the population. And I always took that to heart. I'm like, wow, that makes so much sense. If you get up and want to go to work every day, it's like, it's an unbelievably great thing to have. And I think, I got into this on a fluke. We loved punk rock, and all the punk rock bands that we wanted to see weren't coming to Montreal. So he just started calling agents and booking shows. And I was a bike messenger going to college and running our companies on credit cards. That. And, it was a labor of love. And if you told me back in the early 90s that I'd be doing this for a living, I would have been like, there's no fucking way. It's absolutely impossible that I would ever be able to do this for a living. So the passion, I think, comes from that, and the passion comes from live music. And, we've started Music Canada Live, which is basically a lobbying group, more or less. It's advocacy group for the live music in Canada, because there's never, labels, publishing, recorded industry all have a voice. And we realized that live music does not have a voice. So we started this organization, Jesse Kumagai, those guys came to us and said, we want to start this Canada-wide organization. I've been going to NACPA meetings for 20 years, feels like at least 15 years. And, that's an interesting organization. Seeing all these legends in a room talking about the business is super cool. And I remember as a younger promoter walking into that room with Donald and being like, holy crap, look who's in this room. This is like the who's who of what we do, which was,
feels
very
like
humbling.
Wall Street to see you in the one of us.
Yeah, it's very humbling. And then to be like, we're now pushing there's so many younger promoters coming out. But with Music Canada Live, it's like, okay, so these guys come and talk about passion. It's like you taking time out of your day to advocate, to come up with policy and try to push live music forward, from small clubs to festivals to non-for-profits. And that's been really fun. As you progress in your career, often people plateau. I feel like there's no limit. There's always going to be a new kind of something to do, and new kind of music, new kind of festival. Glick's like, we're always like, oh, we should do that. We should do that. Imagine if we put that and that together. And that's really what I love about this business.
Awesome. Promoter 101 in Canada with the great Nick Farkas. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. It was a lot of fun.
Nick Farkas is just an impressive promoter. I respect the hell out of him.
This is Stephen Riff from Embrace Presents in Toronto, Canada, and I'm stoked to be on Promoter 101.
We're also excited to be joined by ITB's Steve Zapp, who sat down with Dan during this year's ILMC conference in London to share his thoughts on touring in the UK and beyond.
Promoter 101, we are at ILMC, and I'm joined by good friend Steve Zapp's with us. Thanks so much for being here, Steve.
Hi, good to see you.
So a couple of years ago, we were on a panel, and I think we got yelled at by the moderator a couple times, who was Mark Linvette, about screwing off while he was trying to conduct the panel. And I think ever since we've become good drinking buddies.
No, definitely. Always good to see you, and especially at conferences, and catch some bands as well.
I know it's a little weird. We don't have pints in our hand. This feels a little awkward.
Yeah.
Actually, I think this might be the earliest in the day I've ever seen you.
I'm always here early, unfortunately. Late in the bar and early in the morning. I don't know. Yeah, I need to sleep more, I think.
Makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about, you've got a great career, and you focus over here in the UK. Let's talk about who you handle and how you got into the business.
Okay, I think the first thing as a booking agent, just to pick up on that, we work with internationally with our artists outside of American Canada, not just the UK. But how
when I say UK, I mean anything that isn't the US, actually. Yeah, no.
Oops, that will get me into trouble.
Well, it seems like, and I think this is a problem that Americans have in general, and maybe even some Canadians. North America runs differently. We're on our own business system than the rest of the world, and the rest of the world operates on a different system. And we're the unique ones, opposed to how the rest of the world works, because most of the agents book the entire world, or the entire world except North America. And usually Mexico is actually part of what's considered not part of North America when they're talking about that. So in all fairness, I think that's the Americanness in me. But yeah, you're right. It's an international thing.
Just that, yeah. So how it got started, I suppose, when I was at school, I had a hospital radio show, so I was always interested in music and entertainment, shall we say.
Did you say hospital radio show?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It meant certainly student radio and things like that aren't as developed in the UK as in America, but...
Oh, like college radio? Okay,
college radio, yeah. So there was a number of hospitals would have, I suppose, a charity-funded radio station, and I'm still not sure what the listenership was, but we would go around and collect requests from patients, and it was quite eye-opening because, you tended to get to know some of the patients, but you knew that they were, most of the ones we collected from were either maternity wards, so, the mums who were about to have their children wouldn't be in there long, which was positive normally. And the other one was the cancer wards, which was obviously much sadder because you hoped that the patient would still be there the following week. And what we'd try and do was play music to try and...
lift spirits.
Lift spirits. And don't know what impact it had, but even if it was a little one, I hope it did. But
and that broadcasted to the hospital, but
internally in the hospital, yeah.
Okay.
Back then, it was
so a great way to practice.
Yeah, and
I'd never heard of that before. Hospital radio.
Yeah, it's still going, and it's obviously it was still quite expensive with the equipment and stuff, and it relied on charity donations and stuff. But I said that's how I suppose I first got connected with more of the entertainment stuff. Then when I was at university, I went to a load of concerts. I was a kid who bought the ticket, bought the T-shirt at the show. I remember going up to one band after a show, a band called Paris Angels, who had a indie #1 hit in the UK yonks ago. And I said to them, I think there was 96 people at the show, and I apologised saying I wish there'd have been more people, and probably that was one of the better ones on the tour with hindsight. But and then one day one lunchtime I was looking at my student newspaper, and there were the elections for president, finance officer, entertainment officer, all non-paying posts, student, etc. And I really liked the sound of the entertainment job. I tried to do a bit of lighting tech stuff. That, the technology side of things, sadly, is not my forte. And so I stood for the election against the entertainment's manager's sort of pet candidate, and won, which surprised a lot of people. But I got a punch in the stomach in the corridor that night from one of his crew because their candidate didn't win. And not long after I won, the Students' Union found itself in £500,000 of debt. This was a long time ago now. They'd taken on new staff. The entertainment manager hadn't existed before. The assistant position hadn't existed. The general manager, they spent a lot of money on refurbishing the student union that they didn't technically have. And also, he asked at his interview if he could loss lead to make the venue a name. And he did, but they said yes.
They lost leaded with money they didn't have?
Well, they didn't cap how much he could lose. So they were made redundant. It was redundant. and all the money was in Students' Union Fund, and it was all swallowed because it wasn't in escrow. So all the clubs who would just start, the rugby club, the sailing club, all the big sporting clubs, for example, all lost their money. So they blamed entertainment. So when I just started as entertainment officer, and the finance officer on the committee was a rugby guy. So it was really, really tough to get anything passed because although it wasn't myself, people who've been involved in entertainments before have been the ones who have been seen very significant in the loss.
So there was no money to play with?
No money to play with, and if the money I could sort of get to, I had to justify every single expenditure. And
So
you couldn't...
It kind of takes the fun out of it.
Yeah, I was never allowed to cross-collateralise events and bar take. So... The venue was never open on a Sunday night, for example, and then one day I had a Teenage Fan Club show. It sold out 1,100 tickets. The bar take was really good, so they made money, but if the event had been on, but I wasn't allowed to use that comment.
Because a bar owner would, in real life, be able to offset his door loss with the money he took at the bar. You would factor that into, do we want to book this band again?
Yeah, definitely. And then I was going to go on an exchange trip to university in the Netherlands. And then I got elected for a second year with outstanding, because I'd actually made some money for the Students' Union, which was cool. So I did that again. I left university. I was offered a job as an entertainment manager or an economic consultancy job. I think I took the job that I thought my family, girlfriend, etc. would want me at the time would want me to do, which was the economic consultancy job, to keep music as a hobby. And you know what, truthfully, I was pretty, a lot bored with the job I was doing. You
didn't see yourself as a 9-to-5 guy in the economic world, huh?
Yeah, it wasn't really me. And I was still going to shows, and I met a band outside a venue, and they asked me if I could manage them, and so I managed a couple of bands, had a really good go at it. Unfortunately, they didn't really take off, quite tough at the time. Very much like now, it's really hard for music goes in waves, and at the moment, guitar-based bands aren't necessarily that as fashionable as other parts of history. And so I was managing them. I then worked for a music magazine and then got off. I was talking to the people at the Barfly at the time. That was a very grassroots venue who did a really good job of developing young bands, and then they expanded the network. But we started a magazine called The Fly, which I was the first editor of, and started that. It was only last year or a couple of years ago, closed.
Because The Fly was associated with the Barfly club chain with 200-seat cap, rock clubs around. Yeah.
And they had a magazine that was based out of it, and with B, who was one of the guys at the Barfly, I set it up with him and was the first editor. But more and more as we were expanding, it became a bit more, how should I put it, there was much more pressure on advertising and selling advertising to the magazine, which was away from what was, again, me. I was more into the artists and discussing with the artists reviews, interviews and stuff. And
right, if you were going to sell ads for a magazine, you could be selling for the newspaper or radio station.
Yeah, and in the end, we went our separate ways. And then I got a call from a very old friend who used to be an entertainments booker at a place called ULU, which is University of London Union. And this guy was a friend of mine, was a guy who I'm sure you're all familiar with, called Ricky Gervais.
Yeah.
His friend at Kingston Uni, he gave me a reference and I went for an interview, got the job. And it was very, very late in the day. I booked a good term, but it was very late in the day for booking a band for the opening event, Freshers event. And there was a couple of options. In the end, we went with a band called Carter, the Unstoppable Sex Machine, who used to be really big and obviously had a cult following, but they had a band they wanted to open called TISM, who are Australia. And TISM, no more politically incorrect than the average comedian, but it was a tongue-in-cheek stage show. They held up some placards and stuff, joke things, but they were seen by the Students' Union, who again were frightened of losing their bar to the university, as sexist, racist, homophobic. And the next day I was in the office, I lost my job over a support band, which was very bizarre. And the artists were really upset about it, Carter. But
probably came with the headliner, right? You probably didn't even book him.
I had no say in it. But
there's a catch-22.
Yeah, that was a learning experience in itself. And after that, again, I started another economics job. I would go there 9 till 1. I was managing a couple of bands, and
so you were tinkering, you were figuring it out.
Yeah, and I'd wanted to work in A&R. I discovered some bands back in the past that went on to become really big, but I didn't really have a position or job to do anything with them. Things like a band called The Coldplay, who obviously went on with a shorter name to do very well. But, I just found them in the city of Manchester. I just thought they were a really good band, but I had no job or position to do anything.
You didn't have a vehicle to help them, yeah?
No, I sat down with the manager, who was lovely, one day in a cafe and had coffee with him and helped them with a couple of university shows, but in the end they couldn't play because of scheduling. I was trying to, as you say, find my position of something that made sense. And then one day I was standing outside the Barflight pub, and an A&R guy I knew called Olivia said, "We got this band called the Young Offenders we've signed. We haven't got an agent yet. Can you help us?" So I went into Columbia Records in the Sony building, spent a few weeks, month booking tour for them. That went quite well. And then I thought no more of it because a couple of my friends at the time had bigger agents kept stealing bands off them, and I thought that was just didn't seem very savoury. So I went my own way. And then one day I got a call from an Irish manager of a band called the Ultramontanes that I actually loved, saying, "We've been sitting in a bar in Ireland talking. Our agents left to sail ships around the Mediterranean," which sounds like a good decision.
Somebody was chasing their passion too.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus. And they wanted an agent, and I said, "Yeah, I'd love to do it," because I loved the band. We're really good. And then, so I decided, I was working 9 till 1, running home, booking shows at home from my bedroom, which was back in the day of dial-up internet, and so my phone bill was more expensive than any income I was bringing in. And then I was going out in the evenings, shows, coming back, finishing booking. And then there was a guy called Sean who set up and run a label called Drowned in Sound, who was a young kid who helped me for a while. And then one day I got a call from a guy called Martin Hopewell, who ran Primary Talent Agency and until recently owned and run the ILMC, saying, "We got this young band called Countermine. We got nobody can book club shows. Can you help us?" So on a consultancy basis for a while, 6 months at least, I booked them tours. And then one day I said, "Martin, you've got nobody who books young bands. I want to do this. Why don't we do it?" And then he offered me a job, which I was really grateful for. I worked there for a year. For various reasons, it didn't quite work out for either party. I then spent a year at a company called 888's, which Charlie runs. It's brilliant. And finally moved to ITB, and that's about 15 years ago. And that's a very long-winded way of getting to where I am now. And obviously, I think the key, putting my head down and never giving up, trying to get somewhere, if that makes sense.
And ITB is a major player internationally. You guys are a big agency.
Yeah, it's a company run by a guy called Rod McSween and Barry Dickens, who've been in the industry forever, and represents clients from like Guns N' Roses, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, The Who, Aerosmith, etc. And that's just amazing to work and learn from them.
Okay, so now you've got these mentors that know the business in and out. You found your way to the agency business. You're starting to sign acts. Who's on the hit list?
The first ones that really assignment started doing well were before I went to ITB were a band called the Cooper Temple Claws and a band called Biffy Clyro. And at ITB, the first ones that probably really, really grew for me was a band called Editors, who've had a very, very good career so far, especially in mainland Europe. A band called the Cortinas, who are from Manchester and just do unbelievable business in the UK. And they're about to sell out a 50,000 capacity summer show in Manchester, and it's pretty amazing. Yeah, and then a few rock bands. Rod worked with a band called Soulfly that I took over working with. And
okay, and you pretty much book everywhere except North America, right?
It varies between acts. Most of our artists we book everywhere except North America and Canada. Some acts, especially if there's been an American agent in place a long time before the European act, they might book South America or Australia, but so it varies, but primarily everywhere apart from North America and Canada.
So is there partnerships that develop with American agents that you become partners with, where they sign something and they give it to you for the rest of the world and vice versa, since you don't book in those places?
When I first started, it was very much US, Canada was very independent from European agencies. There would be friendships and some strategic situations where, two agents or agencies might help each other with exchanging bands. There wasn't much formal relationships. Now with William Morris opening an office, it's not as if it's a closed shop with CAA.
And Coda's now Paradigm.
Yeah, Coda, Paradigm, UTA buying the agency group. We're now independent again for the last couple of years. And I mean, it's obviously easier, if somebody in America rings and says, "Here's this hot band, we've already signed them, do you want to be involved?" I want the people to work with my artists who are really, really enthusiastic and really into the artist, not just because of a company company line. So the fact that, if we take on an act or one of our artists wants an American-Canadian agent, I'd rather give them half a dozen options for them to talk to and find out who they're comfortable with.
Opposed to just saying one guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Find the person that has the best vibe with them.
Yeah, I think that helps everybody, truthfully.
It makes a lot of sense. And you know a lot of those guys. You go to South by Southwest every year. It's like clearly you've built relationships over the years and you've shared bands between the US and
yeah,
here,
definitely.
So.
And also some of the agencies who have got UK-based offices or European-based offices these days still send me acts to check out. So
Makes sense. Okay, so do you have a hit list for next week while you're at South by, or are you still constantly signing, right?
less than I used to. I mean, for South by, my aim is to go there for 3 reasons. One, to catch up with and see artists that I work with who are playing. B, to catch up with people in the music or entertainment industry that I haven't seen for a while or want to catch up with. And thirdly, to see new artists for 2 reasons. One, if I can find 1 or 2 acts that I love and really want to work with, brilliant. And also, to be better informed of what's going on for my existing artists. If there's packaging options or who might be a good support for them next year. I think, you get a good vibe and feel of what's happening or likely happen by being there.
Well, the brilliantness of you going to a music fest like South by that has so many American bands playing at it, most of those acts, even if they have representation in the States, don't have representation over here. So most of them, I would imagine, would jump at the chance. And if you see that it's starting to break over there, and you can see the lines, you can obviously see it in real time. It's not like looking up followers on Facebook or Twitter. You can literally see the line around the block for that new band. Who are they? Do they have representation? That seems like a great indicator.
Yeah, definitely. I think more than when I started as an agent, artists seem to get agents, whether American agents or European agents, earlier and earlier in their careers. I'm not quite sure how, but there seem to be more and more agents every year.
And there are more acts touring, it seems, too, every second.
Yeah, and so competition is harder. If I find an act that I like, there's a good chance, unless I've got on really, really extremely early, which sometimes also isn't necessarily healthy for a band. Yeah, there's chances there's other people into them as well. So it's certainly a lot more competitive than I think it used to be.
With what you're working, who's playing South by Southwest next week that's showcasing?
I've actually got to sit down in the next few days and work out my schedule and who I'm going to see, truthfully, because I've been focused on this conference, the ILMC that I'm at this week, but I still need to do some work on that.
Okay, but you've got a handful of acts that are showcasing next week.
Yeah.
I would imagine that the American agents, record labels, and managers are more involved with setting up those showcases and making that happen as part of that process.
Yeah, definitely. The label or the agent, the American agent, or the lawyer sometimes will put shows and showcases into place. So in that way round, I tend to find out a little bit later, shall we say, on where and who's playing. And also I'll suddenly get tomorrow, whenever I get a list of 5 more parties that an act's added that I didn't know about. It's pretty crazy there, as you know.
Yeah, it's a non-stop. If you've never been to South by and you're listening to the podcast, it is spring break for the music industry, and you just got to go and jump in, and you'll leave knowing a whole lot more people than you went with, and an amazing amount of bands. So I've noticed it's changed a little bit, because as I was talking about, you see a line around the block at South by, you know something is happening, and who is the band that everyone's lined up for is a question that'll matter. It used to be that an act could break here or they could break in the States, and it wouldn't necessarily be one or the other. But now that we have the internet, if something breaks somewhere, there's going to be a following for it pretty much everywhere. Not in the same levels, but radio isn't what it used to be, and internet is, with YouTube and Pandora and Spotify and things going viral, has changed the landscape. So are you looking at different indicators now when you see a band starting to break in a different part of the world?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously social media and things like Spotify are becoming increasingly important and strong, but equally, you can see an artist who has, like, say, 500,000 Facebook friends, and they play a show in London and 30 people turn up. And vice versa, there's still artists who don't have a strong online presence who can sell thousands of tickets. So I think certainly there's a change, and I think we're still quite early in that to work out exactly how the connection. Also, the other danger is, I think with acts who are very big online, there's a danger that with people's attention span and concentration these days, that an artist might break one song and not the actual act themselves. So you need to see past that as well. Somebody's got 2 or 3 million streams on one song doesn't necessarily mean they're a long-term artist. And I know that was the same when people put out albums out physically only, but normally, you'd buy an album and you'd listen to the 10, 11, 12 tracks and probably go, oh, there's 3 good songs on that, and some people would think about taking it back to the shop if they could, etc. But you'd at least get deeper into the artist than one track. That's one thing that concerns me, is how
one-hit wonders.
Yeah, that's always happened, even through radio, but how you develop an artist deeper than
the freshman single. Yeah.
Many people are busy with their lives and they haven't necessarily got time.
Have you figured out the answer for that?
I think I think that's something certainly looking at and trying to work out long term.
Not yet. Okay, so with the younger agents listening, and any secrets to success or advice that you have for them?
I think there's a number of things. Firstly, work ethic in this industry is really hard. It's not a 9 to 5 job in reality. I think to be close to your artists, know what's actually exciting for them and what they don't like as well. I think be available for your artists. And I think obviously just like having a good ear for music, whatever that is, helps. And I think, do you know what? There's also a lot of, I think you can create your own luck, but I think there's also a lot of luck involved. I know some agents who've worked with loads of bands over the years and haven't really yet had one that's gone really internationally large and successful. And then I remember one who started as an agent a number of years ago, and he took on 8 or 10 bands, and his first 2 of those 8 or 10 bands became arena acts within the first couple of years.
Oh, I want to be that guy if I'd been an agent.
And I said the person on his desk next to him could have been 10 years to get that phase. So sometimes it's timing and luck and or destiny, whatever you believe in with that, and sometimes just being in the right place at the right time.
Awesome. Hey, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us on Promoter 101.
Cool. Well, great to speak. Cheers.
Thank you, Steve. Steve is one of my favorite people. He's a great agent and even a better hang.
Hey, everyone. This is Sasha Bombaji, production manager for Barry Manilow, Beck, and a few other greats. And I'll be coming up next on Promoter 101.
Coming up next is 888 Management's Whitney Bond, teaching us why management needs to have their hands on the day-to-day of marketing all concerts. Promoter 101, we are at South by Southwest hanging in the suite. Special guest today from 888 Management, our good friend, Whitney Bond is here. Whitney, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me and welcome to Austin. Thank you for making the journey.
South by Southwest comes and we all follow.
I love having y'all here and thank you for boosting the economy.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. It looks a little slow out there right now. Anyway, you have a really cool job, and I think our listeners will like to know about it. Not all management companies are full service when they say they're full service, but you guys have an in-house marketing department at 888, and that's really what you're hands-on with, and you handle some of the biggest clients 888 has.
Yes, I am one of the marketing directors at 888 Management. Personally, I handle Chase Rice, Josh Abbott Band, Kevin Fowler, and Pat Green. I handle mostly a lot of country, but that doesn't exclude us from guys like Kaleo, Wheeler Walker Jr. We've got a lot of up-and-coming pop-ish guys and girls, and we also do have the Eli Young bands, the Joe Nichols of the world, so there's a lot going on at 888 Management, and I think one of the perks of booking one of our artists and working with us is you get a marketing person who's dedicated to the marketing of our artist and your show.
So when you say I get you, how does that come?
It comes usually in the form of an email from a cute blonde Jewish girl in Austin, Texas, here to make sure you spelled the band's name right, make sure you have the artist's photo correctly, and usually you hear from me once the contract is signed, and then you don't stop hearing from me until it is over.
I don't know that I'd call you blonde, but...
Yeah, hear from a blondish, curly-haired, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jewish girl from Austin, Texas. And one of my favorite calls, I was on the phone with the promoter once, just telling him everything we do. And he was like, so are you free? Do we have to pay for you? Like, are you a added service? And I said, I mean, if you want to write me a check, here's my Whitney Bond, here's the address. But no, I come with the booking of our client.
You're like a BMW. You're a service that's provided because it's a high-end clientele.
Very high-end clientele, and we know.
I want to make sure everybody knows we're talking about artists and not any kind of other service that might be provided with extra high-end things.
We are pretty legal, moral, and ethical at 888, and that's one of the bonuses of working with us.
Just seems like a lot of the words we were using to describe this seems like other fields.
Totally,
in the world.
no.
And I just wanted to point that out, that
do not do that.
The services that you provide are all things that your parents were proud of.
Very proud of. Very proud of.
I've met them. They're very proud of you.
Yes, thank you.
Big Straight No Chaser fans. We see them at the Dallas shows.
Yes. Hi, Mom.
So let's talk about how you got here. First of all, let's talk about how you got into this world from your college education, which I know is Indiana.
I went to college at Indiana University with the goal of being on the radio. My whole life, all I wanted to do was be a radio DJ. And
I could see you as a morning personality.
I wanted to be a morning show producer.
Wake up with Whitney Bond.
I wanted to do that my whole life. There's still radio tapes of me at the kitchen table when I was 8 years old. And after graduating from Indiana University, where I took not one radio course, knew nothing about radio, all I knew was a lot about the business world and having to hustle and make it. And I made it off of $6 an hour working in Dallas, Texas at Susquehanna cluster there, which turned into Cumulus. And I did anything and everything you could do at the radio station. I filed papers. I was a board operator. I did morning shows. I did overnights. You name it, I could do it at that radio station.
What was the format of the station?
I worked for the whole cluster. So I did conservative talk radio. I spent a lot of time in classic rock. I did country, and then I did sports radio. And one day
Very WKRP of you.
It was very KLIF so it was a heritage talk radio station. I did a lot of George Norrie and Alan Combs, so I've heard and seen a lot of ghosts in my life. And things happened, and the operations manager was like, I really don't think there's an opportunity for you to be on air, but here's a promotions job. We'd love to have you. And I became the marketing coordinator for KPLX 99.5 The Wolf, which was the largest country radio station, Cuming radio station in country.
What market?
Dallas, Texas, America. One of
Dallas, Texas, America.
Sorry. And I was
the USA, folks.
USA. I was there for about 18 months in that capacity. And I was then offered a job here in Austin, Texas, America, at Clear Channel for Case 101 and 98.1 KVET. And then while I was there, I met my current bosses, who I now work for at 888 Management, Bruce Kalmick and George Corey.
They were like rolling together. You met them simultaneously?
Ironically, no.
Because I never really see them at the same place at the same time.
I'm one of those nervous people who I get mad when they fly together at the same time. Like, if that plane goes down...
What happens to the kids?
What happens to the kids? So I do get mad when they travel together, but that's a whole nother story.
So who's your favorite of the two of them? Yeah, I thought so.
Bruce brought me in.
Truth or Patron?
Bruce brought me in, and I was the largest fan of one of George's clients. So I'm very impartial and love them both in their own unique ways.
Look at you being all political.
Yeah, I love them both. They are wonderful people who've blessed me beyond my deservance.
All right, so let's talk about what you do. I remember our first phone call.
Oh, well, tell me about this.
You not remember?
I think I do.
It might have been Whiskey Meyer, actually.
It might have been Whiskey Myers.
But I remember they're coming through the Northwest, and you're like, I want to see your marketing plan. And I was just like, you want to see a marketing plan for a 300 cap club in 2 markets? We're going to buy some weekly. We're going to try and get radio, give some tickets away that they certainly will not. We're going to beg them to list the show on their website. We're going to do some email blasts and some posters. And then we're going to buy some bar hour radio. By the way, that's how you market a club show for when you're building a country act in a small market. And you were like, yeah, I just need you to throw that in a grid and tell me exactly which papers and when. I'm like, it's a $900 budget. And you're like, I actually want to see what you're doing because I actually care. I won't just say, yeah, that's good, fine.
You know, we do care about what you're going to do and where you're going to put the band's name and how it's going to look. And we treat our artists and expect them to be given the respect that they're due out on the road from a club and a bar. And we do play a lot of those smaller honky tonks, but we want it to be done right. And we know you do stuff right, but you're one of the limited who do things right.
I don't know that I would be the example that everyone should measure their careers by as far as how we marketing shows, but I would say that we feel like when we get calls like that from managers or agencies, and it's a new thing in the last handful of years that agencies have been having marketing people too, where we're getting used to this, but the second guess of what you're doing and how are you marketing the show and get this person to approve it. And it's a weird thing because it was a job that we didn't used to have these people to approve anything. They didn't exist, and now they do, and some of them are very useful. It's like, hey, the show's not selling. What's working other places? Whitney knows what's working in other places.
We know what's working in other places, and the one thing that it helps on my end and the marketer at the mid-level management company or even agency is what else is going on in your market. Like, please know your markets and know what's going on. Yes, every market is a walk-up market. I've heard that. If I had $1, I'd be the richest person ever.
Yeah, and if I actually had $1 for everyone that actually was a walk-up market, I'd have $3.
But is it a walk-up market the same night as a Luke Bryan concert? Is it a walk-up market even if it's snowing outside?
Is it a walk-up market if it's a jazz show?
Just know what we're coming into and help me that way, and I will deliver you whatever content you need from the artist, whether it's Josh Abbott Band, who is just on Conan O'Brien, or the brand new, if I'm being honest, music video from Chase Rice. It's my job to inform the promoter with content to help bring our artist to your town and make sure everybody knows about the show and the artist.
All right, you know what I really miss? The days of the 8x10 glossies. Where have they gone?
The 8x10 glossies have turned into the 11x17 posters.
I know it's probably more turned into the link that you get sent of the image of the band. The approved image.
And when you book an artist with 888, you get a nice little link that has all the approved photos. It has the bios. It has the album minis. It has the songs that you can produce your own radio spot with.
Oh, the assets.
I will hand deliver you assets upon signing of the contract.
Look, Works Entertainment also does the same thing. Kyle Novak is hands-on with every work show. Matter of fact, I don't know where he gets the time to do them all, because the amount of shows we do with Works alone is a full-time job for him. And they have, a lot of other shows going on outside of us. But clearly, this job where you guys are involved in actually marketing with us, same thing, UTA has Eddie Clemens over there doing that. Stephanie Myers is at William Morris. CAA has always had Allie McGregor doing her thing. And all of the major agencies now have this Adam at APA. It's a part of the game. ICM has Melanie Davis. It's just they're all there to help. And they're all overwhelmed. I mean, they have 1 million tours going on. But when a show's not selling and you call them and say, hey, it's not working, is it working everywhere else? And if it is, where is it working? And what are they doing that we're not? Because you have their marketing plan. And can you compare them? Because they can't necessarily send me the marketing plan from the other show that is working, but they can see, oh, they bought Twitter, and that's the only difference. Maybe you guys should drop $500 on Twitter ads next week and see if that moves the needle. Oh, look at that. They've spent a bunch of money on NPR. We didn't really see that as a thing, but that worked better for them, and their show's selling. So maybe try that. Because we can't get into every show. I mean, they have 5,000 shows going on every week at these major agencies. You guys have hundreds of shows as a management firm. We have hundreds of shows as a promoter. So we're not all worried about every single show. I think we're worried about the shows that are a disaster. We're all trying to make sure that everything, we're checking the box. Did the press release go out?
Correct.
Did the social media happen? Did we try to get interviews? Did we work the posters on the street? Street team. Is print happening in its limited world of 2% of the budget that it now is? Is social media popping hard? All of these little things that we now do. But I think particularly it's just, okay, we're checking the boxes and the ticket sales are fine on those shows. And then we get to the show that's the clunker for the tour. And that's the one we all come together and okay, what's wrong with Grand Rapids?
I've been very fortunate with you, have not really been in that situation before, but I
assure you we've had shows that don't sell. Not maybe you and me, but in general.
Not maybe you and me, but yes, I'm sure that we have, but...
You show me a promoter that hasn't had a bad show, I'll show you a brand new promoter. It's
that hasn't had a show.
Well, the rule of big numbers is you're going to have bad shows. We don't settle the show. We don't settle the year by the night. We're going to have bad shows. The idea is to never have a bad month and never have a bad quarter. And that makes for great years. But there are going to be bad nights because we're developing artists. And the first time through, nobody knows who the act is. That first time we did Whiskey Myers together, they weren't selling out venues. But now they're doing great across the country.
Exactly.
Josh Abbott didn't start out packing out the rooms, but these are going to be great shows this week.
Yes. It's kind of weird. I have a show with Dan tonight, so it's weird looking at the promoter. I actually got ticket counts for the shows tonight with Dan in the elevator, and it felt good.
Are you going to go?
No, I will not be there.
It's a long commute.
It's a long
from there.
schlep, but
The Crocodile Cafe is a great place to see a show, though. So
and people always ask, do I travel with the band? Do I go to these shows? If you put it in the contract that I need to be there, or you back me into an expense or something like that, I will gladly come to your show. I mean, it's been asked before. Meryl at the Belly Up in Solana Beach always wants me to come, and I say, tell Peter to put it in the contract.
I think Angela would certainly love for you to come up
I
and
know.
cover a show.
Dan has a great team, and it's great to work with him, and I love working with Angela. And this past year, I got to work with you, and we had a show in Denver that I got to work with Aaron. It was Aaron. So.
Aaron Reynolds? Yeah, Aaron runs the Denver marketing. So a bunch of the other markets, too, but he oversees Denver as well. Yeah, no, it's a new thing, though, this whole concept of marketing
It's a great thing.
being all hands on deck, and hopefully we're not missing something, because that's the goal.
Mm-hmm.
It really is a balance of power and check and balance, almost as a government system, whereas the manager sits on high as the president of the band, so to speak, or the president of the band's business, and the agent and the promoter fight out the deal, and once it's confirmed, you come into place and fight out the marketing. And it's not always a fight, but it's a back and forth of, this is our vision, well, this is our vision, and coming to a hybrid, if there's a difference, of, okay, this is what we're doing nationally that really seems to work. And for us to come back and say, okay, we'll try that, or for us to go, no, you know what, in this market in particular, they don't react well to this particular thing. Or, hey, we can't do shows in this town on Friday night because high school football is such a priority, shows will die.
Right.
Or we can't do shows on Sunday because it's a big religious day here, and that's not a good thing. It'd be better to play a Monday than a Sunday in this particular market. And that's what you guys count on us for. So this back and forth dance of, this works really well for this particular artist, and us to go, this works really, really well or doesn't work well for this particular town. And then we find that marriage together where hopefully we're sitting in an elevator going, are we going to sell the last 30 tickets? I think we might.
Yeah. And the one thing I ask of you and just encourage the promoters and venue owners is, we're really nice people who care, and we send out those ticket count requests so we can look at them and compare them to our last play or to another artist on our roster's play. And we are there to help and support you to help make your show great. And that's what I want to do. And we're not being annoying, and we're in it for the betterment of the artist so they can come back and play your room or your bigger room the next time.
Well, clearly, the quicker we all develop the band, the more money we're making and sharing.
Exactly. Sharing. Keyword, sharing. It's cute.
Well, it is. At the end of the day, we need sharing the success.
Yes.
There's plenty of blame to go around when we didn't get there.
Exactly.
But
Plenty of blame.
If we all do our jobs, there's enough money to go around.
And at the end of the day, when I send those marketing reports, it's good to know that I did what I could on our end and you did what you did on your end.
So let's talk about what you expect from a promoter. You just said ticket counts.
I definitely expect ticket counts.
Is that an everybody thing, or is that hard from some people?
Oh, it's very hard for some people. If you are not the right person to give me a ticket count, send me to the right person. You know, don't ignore me. And
Doesn't
then
the agency provide that stuff for you?
Sometimes, but some people...
Do we send those directly to you? Do you get them from Des?
I send every Monday and Wednesday, I send an email to all of our buyers or promoters asking for ticket counts. And Des is always great, gets them right back to us.
By the way, if you are collecting ticket counts, if you happen to be at a management firm or an agency of any sort and you're collecting ticket counts, please keep in mind that time zones are a real thing. So if you're coming in on the East Coast at 9:30 and you're responding 2 hours later at 11:30, except on the West Coast it's still 8:30 and you're sending your second request while people still aren't in the office yet, please think about where you're hitting people up for ticket counts and realize before you call to bite their head off on that third phone call after 2 emails and a third phone call, it's not 9:30 yet on the West Coast.
Agreed.
And be a little sensitive to that because people are walking in and you're not the only show they're dealing with that morning. They've got, in a lot of cases, we're overseeing a couple hundred shows at any given moment. So the people that handle counts are getting requests from dozens and dozens of agencies and managers and sometimes road managers for accounts. So there's a lot of repeat because everybody wants it directly from the source.
And you also have to remember a lot of venues and clubs aren't open on Mondays, and I send them out on Monday. So I know 8 Second Saloons in Indianapolis, I'm not going to get their account till at least Tuesday or Wednesday because they're not there on Monday. And that's okay because I have a relationship with them. It helps that they're in Indiana, but I have a relationship with them and we can talk those things out and we know what's going on.
Now go back, explain this to me. They close?
The bar's not open on a Monday. Lots of bars aren't open on Mondays.
And the business office isn't open?
Yeah.
You're allowed to take days off?
Other people are.
What the fuck?
I know, it's a thing. I'm going on vacation in 3 weeks. I didn't know if you knew that happened either.
I mean, I take my phone and my laptop and my pad with me, and I'm ready to work when I'm on the road because it's a service business, and we're here for our clients 24/7.
We are here for our clients 24/7, and
Well, apparently not everyone else that you deal with is.
Part of the...
I'm not talking about at the firm.
Right, I'm just saying...
I know that you can call George or Bruce on Sunday, and they will pick up their cell phone, and they'll jump right into it.
Exactly, and you empower great people with a great team, so while I'm floating in the ocean on a big boat, if you have a problem or need something, it can be handled by one of my assistants or someone else in the building who knows what they're doing. So back to the ticket count thing, what can y'all do?
Okay, well, right. Well, and we'll skip ahead on the ticket count because it's who gives a fuck.
I give a lot of fucks about ticket counts.
Well, and I'll show you our system later. It'll blow you away. But I know not everybody has the resources. And, I mean, I started booking shows out of my bedroom when I was a kid, and it took a long time to get to the point where we had a staff where a couple people do ticket counts and build the infrastructure where there's a system for that and there's software for that. But nevertheless, what do you expect from a promoter? Forget the ticket count for a second. Let's talk about just pure marketing. What do you want to see? And I know for a fact that we provide you with a pretty detailed outline of everything we did, not only a summary, but a backup of everything. Are you expecting an ad pack from everybody, and do you get that kind of ad pack from everybody?
Very few times do I get an ad pack. I have heard of tour managers or people getting them on the back end at settlement, which is also great. I like to know that happens. It is nice to know that
Which
y'all
is,
are...
by the way, the normal procedure for the industry, unless there's a tour marketing person that's asked for it.
In my 5 or 6 years of doing this, the number of ad packs I've gotten, I can probably count on my hands and toes outside of working with you.
Well, if you ask for it, you get it. I mean, the same thing with Works. Those guys asked for the ad pack as well, so they're copied on it because they want to see everything that they've agreed to be placed. They want to see how it came out, how it looked, and everything else. But I think that should be a norm. But yeah, it normally goes to the production guy and I just show during settlement.
And simple
Who
things.
normally leaves it in the trash can in the room without ever flipping through it.
Is the band's name spelled correctly? Are you using the current photo? Does the photo that's on your webpage match what's on your ticketing link? Is your ticketing information correct? Is the link on your website going to the right ticket site? So many of those little things get overlooked by so many people, and that's the one thing that the artist is going to catch and then call me, or a tour manager is going to text me at 6 a.m. in the morning and say, it says Josh Abbott and not Josh Abbott Band. Every band, every organization has its quirks.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And there's fines in the contracts for some of that stuff.
And there have been many a times where on our end...
Does anybody ever pay those fines? Because it's in Henry's contract.
It is.
If you misspell the band, it's like $1,000 fine or something. Has anybody ever actually gotten the fine and then paid it?
If it involves money, I do not get involved. But many a times people will say, tickets aren't selling. We're not moving tickets. Why is the show not selling? Well, is your ticket link working correctly? Does the ticket link that the radio station has, is it working correctly? Did the link that you gave me at the on sale, is that still the same link? Something as simple as that can really affect your ticket sales.
Kind of like, did you try to reboot your computer?
Is your computer plugged in? Like, is the toaster turned on? Like, those type of things. And then it just goes into bigger things of you knowing your market, you knowing your people. Do y'all respond great to video ads? Do you need a video liner? Do you need anything? And let me know, and I will either get it for you or find a happy compromise of how we can come into your market and slay and just make it a mazel.
Bring in the Yiddish.
Yeah.
During the podcast.
Totes my goats.
Promoter 101, Austin, day one, South by Southwest. Whitney Bond, Triple Eight Management. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's quite an honor. And y'all have a great time out here.
A Jew that says y'all. You got to love that.
A Texas blonde hair, blue eyed, curly haired Jew that says y'all. Single, too.
Ready to mingle, people. You can find Whitney Bond by emailing her at
Whitney at triple the number 8 mgmt.com.
I'm a huge fan of Whitney. I'm a huge fan of everything they do over at 888, and I couldn't agree more with her. This is a woman that knows how to build careers.
Hey, this is Rob Zaffarelli from UTA. I'm on Promoter 101.
Creative Law Network's Dave Ratner enlightens us on why we need to read before we sign anything. Promoter 101, we are excited to have the legal mind of the great Dave Ratner. Dave, thanks for joining us, man.
Pleasure to talk to you, Steiny. My pleasure.
So the business comes down to relationships, but when those relationships go wrong, you jump into action.
Well, ideally, I'm working before they go wrong. When things go wrong, the first thing we say is, what does the contract say? Right? We always look to the paper. So hopefully I've been involved beforehand getting the contract right. It makes it a lot easier to fix the problem or just avoid the problem altogether.
Okay, and that's why we spend all that money on legal to get it right in the first place. So what are the first couple things everybody needs to know when it comes to making a deal so they don't wind up in court, hopefully?
Depends a lot on the deal. So if we're talking about promoting shows, whatever your performance agreement, whether it's going to be with the artist or if you take it at the venue with the venue, the main things are just to get all the deal points straight. So whatever, date and time and payment and, rider and whatever else, just make sure it's all clear. And the thing with the contract is, if everything goes well, you're never going to look at the contract, right? If everybody is happy, everybody gets paid, it's not a problem. We pull out the contract when things go wrong. So we're always thinking about, what happens when the band can't make it and has to cancel? What happens when, there's a storm and the power goes out? All those type of things that we've all seen happen, or at least I have, is what we want that contract to handle.
All right, well, let's talk about that for a minute, because all the big agencies now have these addendums. These crazy addendums that say not only are they not responsible for anything, basically, but I'm responsible for everything that goes on that they may fuck up, is the way I kind of read that stuff. Are you aware of the contracts addendums that I'm talking about that have come into place the last couple of years?
Yeah. I push back on it. There's some pretty crazy stuff in there. And I think, I'm not going to speak for any particular agency, but I think some of these, they're figuring a lot of the buyers are just going to sign it without reading it, or the buyers aren't experienced, so they don't think they can push back. But, I redline it. We take this out. We change that.
Now, you don't recommend that, right? Not just signing it without reading it? That's not your philosophy.
Definitely not. I wouldn't be doing very well if that was my philosophy. No, one thing you never want to believe, don't let anybody ever tell you, oh, well, this is just our standard form, but, you and I know the deal, right? I mean, I've had it where someone says, oh, well, we know there's a radius clause, but we didn't put the radius clause in there, but we know there's a radius clause. And then they break the radius. So if it's part of the deal, it has to be in the contract.
Okay, so verbal contracts don't mean much.
There are situations under the law where a verbal contract is enforceable, but we certainly don't want to rely on them, because the first thing that any lawyer on the other side is going to say is, where's that in writing? And certainly if you ever get in front of a judge, it's the same thing. It becomes a he said, she said, and you don't want to be stuck in that, because if anything, it's expensive to litigate.
It's funny. I was watching the new Michael Keaton movie the other night. It just came out on In Demand. Founder, which is the story of the McDonald's brothers and Ray Kroc. And it showed how he cut a handshake deal to pay them a percentage royalty that it couldn't be in the main contract. And that's what the story said anyway. And they were never able to prove it because it wasn't in writing, and those guys got screwed out of that. So it seems like that verbal contract versus actually being in writing makes all the difference in the world, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Your first year of law school, you take a contracts class, and you learn about the old case where there was a contract written on a bar napkin and it was enforceable. And yeah, a contract on a bar napkin can be enforceable, but that was a long time ago. And one thing I'll tell you, look, the other thing is, for your listeners who are just starting to promote shows in high school or college like you used to do, and they can't afford a lawyer, a contract doesn't have to be full of all the legal mumbo jumbo. The main thing I tell people, if you're going to try and write your own contract, don't try and write in legalese. What we learn in law school is how to speak that language. So you don't want to try and speak that language. A contract can just be in plain English. The reason we have that language is because it covers all the bases. But it's better to have something, even if it's not the best, than it is to try and do a handshake deal.
Got it. Now, when you do get to that problem area where we're going to the contract and we're fighting over terms and decisions and changes, and you're getting into litigation and what have you, is there ever a time and point where that problem gets settled and you go back to working with these people? how do we ever trust that person again if I've ever had to use my lawyer? Because they're like nuclear weapons, right? It's like, well, you've got yours, I've got mine, but once we use them, they fuck everything up. How do we ever get back from that?
It can be. It can be hard, and maybe you can't. Maybe that spoils it. By the same token, if it got that bad, do you want to do business with that guy again? But yeah, look, this is why the litigation is the nuclear option. We definitely want to avoid it, if only because it's so expensive. But sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of ego involved with going to court. It's about proving the point more than the money. Well, because it's just never cost effective. I can't see a reason in the volume of business that we do to ever go to court. It's like, all right, I'll vote with my wallet and just won't work with you again if I feel like you fucked me or you screwed the deal. It wasn't in the spirit of the deal. Whatever, we'll get past the date and I'll never call you again. And I'll beat you on volume and I'll just not work with you again. But going to court, that gets expensive.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that it's a financial consideration. And so, yeah, you're only going to go down that road if financially it makes sense.
Well, let's hope that we never have to actually use you for that. I prefer you be in contract mode, my friend.
I appreciate it. I definitely agree. I hope that we never go down that road and, everybody stays on the other side of it.
Awesome. Promoter 101, getting some legal advice from the great Dave Ratner. Thanks for being with us, Dave.
Thank you, Stan. It was a pleasure.
Free legal advice from Promoter 101. Our gift to you, our listeners. Don't worry that you didn't get us anything. We still love you.
This is Amy Miller. I'm on Promoter 101, and I'm not wearing pants.
Ba-da-ba-ba.